Hello, beautiful Maryland yoga teacher group and community. My name is Olga Kempora, and today we have an incredible guest with us, Kimberlyn Cahill. I hope that I said it profound
Close. It's pretty
correctly.
close. I have
Beautiful.
aspirations of being a one name, like using just my first name. So maybe we just forget the last name for now.
Oh, absolutely. So we will do Kimberlyn. So I'm really thrilled with Kimberlyn. We already have had one conversation together to a little bit learn about each other and especially, about the work that, she has been creating in the world as a yoga teacher and as a yoga therapist. And so, for our community, I really love to ask, teachers questions that can be helpful to the rest of the community. And I think that first would be a really cool thing, just so that people know who Kimberlyn is what drew you to yoga, Kimberlyn, and how, has your practice evolved over the years, both personally and professionally?
Wow. So what brought me to yoga in the first place is that I almost died in a bicycle accident. And so with head trauma and traumatic injury of a dislocation, I was on bed rest for about a year. And in recovery, once the neurologist and my whole care team approved, my friend brought me into a yoga studio as her guest. Like literally, I couldn't do table pose. I couldn't, there's no way I could do a downward dog pose. I hadn't been sleeping because my head couldn't touch the pillow. So my first my first introduction to yoga was a propped child's pose that I could do for short stints of sleeping in my own bed. So that's how I came to yoga. And it was really meant entirely as a way to get me out of the house. And at that point, I would say reconnected with my body. I didn't yet have the yogic understanding of the body mind connection, though I knew that from my younger years as a dancer, the integration of somatics, body and mind. So the crux of it is that in being in those first few yoga practices, I recognized the dissonance that I had created in my life between how I was living and who I am. And I felt like that first, second, or third yoga practice was the first time that I truly felt like I'm enough just to show up. I couldn't do anything, but it was enough just to breathe. And it was enough just to allow myself to be in that broken, that in process of healing state. And so at that point, I was hooked. I loved it.
Yeah.
I've practiced every day, every day. And then that I will say that early on, my practice was defined as doing asana every day. And then of course, life curveballs. I've had four major surgeries in the whatever it is, 15 years that I've been practicing yoga. So those seasons were harder to do asana, in which case pranayam and meditation became much more rich in my practice. But I also learned through that process that, whew, this was not a safe place. So when my body was recovering and my breath was difficult, particularly with abdominal surgeries, uh, the mind space was not safe. And so that was a real emotional turmoil that I think fundamentally, Olga, really solidified my practice. I don't know if you can see my t-shirt, but this was from one of my teacher training graduates. It says it's all yoga. And I'm not the only one to use that phrase, right? It's all yoga. But truly that sometimes my yoga looks an awful lot like a cat nap in the sun, and other times my yoga looks more like um, hiking in the woods and finding glimmer of sunlight that comes in through the trees and just pausing in what could be a tree pose or Tadasana pose and just breathing. Sometimes my practice is guided by someone else. I really am a strong believer in the sense that, particularly as yoga teachers and guides, we have a commitment to be in the practice as students and receiving, as well as creating that safe space for others to practice alongside and with me. So I specialize today and have moved from my original training in more of a vinyasa style. I practice today and lead today a very customized and adaptable therapeutic practice to build strength and endurance and resilience, all while learning how to recalibrate our nervous system so that we can live vibrantly. And by that, I mean intimately with prana and moving in mind and in body with grace, with ease, with a skillfulness, a tapas, if you will, that allows us to actually live with love, live with joy in the world.
That's beautiful. There is so much of gold, that you have shared. Just, like the beginning of your journey is just remarkable. It's just sometimes we think that just, oh, this is so bad, I had this accident, right?
Yeah.
Yet it's just so beautiful and so inspiring just kind of to me. And I know many of your students and clients to know that actually at that point, I'm hearing that you just gave yourself permission to really explore, something that you would otherwise maybe wouldn't come across as
You
yoga,
know,
you know?
it's so funny that you use that phrase because at the time, I didn't see it as giving myself permission. Today I would, right? In the coaching, the inspired shift coaching that I do today, I would absolutely say, can you give yourself permission to reframe from love? One of my key phrases of learning how to see this not place from a place of lack and fear, but a place of abundance and love, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, it wasn't a cognitive choice, and it wasn't even something that I had to emote myself into permission. It was like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. Like the way I was living
Mm-hmm.
before, I tease, and it's only a little bit tongue in cheek, but I tease that the concussion literally rewired my brain, and I couldn't live the way that I was living before. I had my own business. I was successful in my own business, but the hustle felt less authentic. I used to have a very professional persona, full face of makeup, colored hair, styled to the nines, the whole thing. And in the recovery from my accident, I wasn't going to the salon. I was barely changing out of pajamas. So my hair has been white at the shocks like this since I was young, like mid-20s. But in the time that I was on bed rest, that was growing out, right? And the color was growing out. And so when it came time for my my re-entering of the world, I just chopped it all off. Chopped it all off and committed to no more coloring. And it wasn't that I think that hair color is wrong or bad. It was another layer of my own authenticity blossoming forth. I've worn makeup since, right? Sometimes for photo shoots, sometimes for big events, sometimes but for the most part, I have since learned that it's okay to give myself permission to be my authentic self. And that means, I have some balding eyebrows and I have some, this is me, right? And this is who you're going to see when you come to practice. And I make bad jokes and I sometimes cuss and to me, that's where this practice becomes yoga living as opposed to
Mm.
just a flow on the mat, somehow process my day to day or to get fit.
Yeah, I think that is just such a beautiful journey into the personal inquiry that we all of us, can learn from. Because I think that for most of the people who start practicing yoga and teaching yoga, that physical part, asana practice is just, and there's nothing wrong about it. It's just the journey, that, and then as the journey progresses, there are just different facets that can be explored, and it does resonate with people. For me, asana, as BK Iyengar says, each asana is like a prayer to my body, and it really does something, somatically and energetically. And it's just so beautiful, to witness it within, especially yourself, because I think that, I see someone, Kimberly, and in you, who is just, capable with your presence, with your students, to really, share who you are being. That it's, I'm hearing here is someone who is very authentic and doesn't pretend, anything, but found a really beauty and gold and wisdom in just, being in, the true, who you are in your seed. Now,
And that's only valuable to me, Olga, because it then creates that permission for them to be their authentic self.
right,
and
exactly.
and 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 more than even just aspiring to create a space for them to be authentic, which is lovely, that's great, right? But what does that look like in action? What does that mean to be our authentic self? It means that we can show up and be enough just as we are. As I say here, I'm like, the only expectation, the only requirement is that you breathe. Everything else is optional. And that's got both anatomical and, physical limitations. Literally, we stop breathing, then I got to stop, practice, and call 911, right? Versus, as long as you're breathing, you have the options, because every breath in, every inhalation is our inspiration. Beyond that, what is it that is our preferences? What is it that we can and can't navigate? Because it's in that space that we can then learn, what questions do I have? And as you eloquently said, is that for me, so much, yes, yoga is the inquiry. It's not about finding the answers. It's about being in the question. And can I be in that liminal, but also ever expanding space?
Beautiful. I have another question for you.
Great.
And it's more just kind of, for those of you who will be watching that or are watching that, talking a little bit just kind of about the yoga teacher journey, or someone who I know that you are, a studio owner, right?
Yeah.
Looking back, at your journey as a yoga teacher and therapist, and now as a studio owner, what do you think were some turning points that help you evolve both, in your teaching and also in your leadership?
I think that the first turning point was I was getting feedback from my students, and I was a lead teacher at the largest studio here in my town of Frederick, and I was getting this feedback from students, and it was a little bit of a conundrum for them, but also a praise in the sense that I don't know what it is that you do differently, Kimberlyn, but whenever I'm in your class, I feel like you're speaking directly to me. How do you know these things that are going on in my life? Of course, I don't. But then also, my body feels more aligned and more balanced with my mind and my spirit. And so there were things that I was learning to do that were atypical for the vinyasa style of practice. And I would say specifically, this has actually become more I wouldn't say common, but a little more frequent in yoga in these last few years than they were earlier when I was first learning. And that is more concentration on side body lateral stretching, just to give that elongation of the axial extension and opening up the glute med, the obliques, the quadratus lumborum, if you're an anatomy person. But so that was something that I was really conscious of doing to offset our linear path of living life, right? So getting that feedback really validated that the way in which I was guiding group practice mattered. That was then complemented by people coming to me and sharing how sometimes the vinyasa practice was really throwing out their shoulders or causing them to have an inflamed in self-diagnosed sciatic pain. And so I was able to work with them one-on-one, and I was really minimizing discomfort and pain and helping to recalibrate a sense of balance so that they could continue their practice. That lit me up. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I can participate on a real tangible way to not only heal, right? It wasn't me doing the healing, but bringing my knowledge and bringing my therapeutic adjustment techniques into that practice. I could help them return not only to their mat practice, but also to their life. And then the real epiphany came when I was working as an advanced yoga teacher, and I was participating in some my 500 or whatever advanced training, and I had not really had a lot of interaction with people outside of my community at that point. And so I didn't fully appreciate how my background was influencing my development as a yoga teacher. And that was really critical for me because I have a master's in educational leadership and I have a doctorate in organizational leadership, which is not required, absolutely not required, but it made me uniquely qualified in a way that I think was missing for my teacher training, both at the 200 and the 500 level, that they didn't have an understanding of adult learning theory. And they didn't have a real understanding of how to turn a practice into an offering of service in a commodity environment. And so being able to match the need with a service, that was made known to me because other teachers that I was interacting with were like, wait a minute, say that again. What are you doing? And how are you doing that? And they were calling me, right? Later, after our trainings together were done, they were calling me later and saying, hey, can I just run this by you? And what do you think about this? And it was really validating in the sense that I was able to bring the spirit, right? And by that, I mean the spirituality of yoga with the science of not just developmental movement, but the science of business, the science of organizations and community together. And so I bring
Yeah.
that into my teacher training, I bring that into my practice, I bring that into whatever I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would, if I would be, listening to it, watching that, I would be just so interested to ask you really question, Kimberlyn, just, what do you do that is way, away from traditional or a standard way that other just kind of my approach yoga, how, different that is for you in your work as a yoga therapist and a yoga teacher. Could you just a little bit expand on what you started?
Yeah. So I like to think about things in three progressive or cyclical frameworks, right? And that's intention, attention, and action. So my intention as a studio owner and a practitioner is to provide a safe space for supported self-care. In other words, I'm not here to do the work for you, but I can meet you in that work and we can measure, right? We can work a plan and a strategy to meet you wherever it is that you're at, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, okay? The attention then is paying attention, giving my attention. And in that, it shows up as semi-private and private work. so that I can look at a person's body, make suggestions or comments, and we work with these semi-private spaces, meaning right now it's a max of 6 people. I can do some online too, which is a very different platform altogether, but we do have that available. But we have, in the studio, we have extra large mats. They're 7 by 3, extra thick, and they're doubled. We've got big bolsters, we've got small bolsters. So we've expanded the space in which an individual takes up. And that's not just important for an individual's practice, but it's particularly important when you have person over here who needs a little more space because they have longer arms, or this person needs a little more space because they can't get into that tight shape, right? So by allowing that extra buffer space, one, it reduces the number of students that I can fit in a class, but my expenses are the same, right? So it changes the math from a business sense, but really puts into practice, into action, right? So the intention is supported self-care. The attention is the personalization and customization so that every single practice is unique and different. So much so that I tease, self-tease, that sometimes the sequence on the first side is different than the sequence on the second side. That's not always intentional, right? But we're not really balanced when we come in. So I can have a room full of 6 people and a couple people or whatever online, and they're all making a different shape to accomplish the same intention. And of course, we know that in the sense that you could be in a, a Virabhadrasana 1 with the back knee down. You could be in a Virabhadrasana 1 with the arms narrow, the arms wide, whatever it might be. But then have you done a warrior on your back? Have you done a warrior with the wall, with a chair? And all of those kinds of adaptations, they're all happening at the same time. And so in some ways, what really distinguished me years ago was that I would teach multiple class levels all at the same time, seamlessly. Where that came from, I don't know. Probably decades of teaching in a classroom, right? More, my background is in training, that I could weave all of that in seamlessly, bring them back together, and then again, set them to flight almost to find their pathway, to find their way.
So this is a really cool, because we have a lot of yoga studio owners here, right? Or people who are, on the pathway, in their journey as yoga teachers to create something like that. Oh, I'm sure that just, your niche and just the way how you evolve yourself in what you have now, because you have very successful business, you know, could you a little bit, tell us, what is the journey that took you to the place where you are right now, when you are very successful? It sounds like your focus is more, serving people in smaller groups. I see that, max maybe 6 people plus. I can have people, on a Zoom. Would you just kind of, tell me, how did that evolve into what you are creating now, and how different that is from, the phase one that you have had, when you started
Yeah.
it?
Okay, so I think that maybe the most important distinction of transparency is that the space became semi-private really as a result of the physical space limitations,
Mm-hmm.
and that retail space is expensive, right? So in that space, in that sense, I was already preferring to work with smaller workshop style. And I would teach 30 to 40 people at a time in my public practices before I opened up my own studio in 2018. Gyms, yoga studios. I taught pool yoga in private pools. I mean, you name it. I hustled. I was at one point teaching 26 classes a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to go from there to the studio really came about the conservation of my energy, that I was hustling over the tri-state area carrying my props and my equipment. I mean, I carry a Thai yoga mat, which if you don't know what that is, that can be pretty heavy, in addition to pillows and bolsters and blocks and straps and all of my accoutrements, right, that I would take to a client's home or wherever we were meeting for that. I mean, I've done weddings, I've done, you name it, I have brought yoga to those environments. And so I wanted to reduce the wear and tear on my body. And so that meant establishing a space that people could come to me. Additionally, minimizing the number of practices that I was leading, even if I wasn't doing a practice full out when I was teaching, right? Full out in terms of effort, but also in full out in terms of rest, right? I don't get a savasana, right, when we teach. So it was important for me to recognize that I did not want to keep up with a 26 practice per week schedule in teaching. Now, keep in mind that was on top of my personal practice every day, right? So doing the math, I had to figure out what would that look like, right? As far as how many classes I could afford to back down to, and what would that look like in terms of offsetting that income with one-on-one work, so that I support my family with this business. So as much as I kind of cringe at the idea of having to make financial money decisions, that's the nature of the beast, right? I'm not in the luxury of doing this as just service, which would be my ideal.
Right. I wanted to ask you because, I have gone through a very similar transformation as you have done and really have very, very successful business. Love what I'm doing and hearing just a lot of things that are just kind of, very familiar to my ear. I really have been someone who really self-taught myself everything, about the business, about just, how to run it. Went through failures, which were greatest blessings for me, just kind of to just go and go for it and follow the nudge. And this worked good, but this part didn't work, so well. I wanted to ask you, do you have any just kind of, like business background that really did help you to develop this? Or you know what was it was that was a turning point for you to really turn it into, I mean, this is really incredible. People, if you are hearing this, here you have a lady who didn't do it just for fun. She actually supported the entire family. She has brought an income that has sustained her to support the entire family. So, I would like to perk up everybody's ears, to hear, a little bit just kind of, from you what it was, for you. It's your time. I would share my just kind of, side, but I really want, for you to share what that was or what that has been for you that really turned the corner for you.
Wow. Yes. I think probably the most fundamental mind shift that actually started in my business before I found yoga was embracing the idea that first and foremost, education and being a facilitator, companion guide is my dharma, right? And owning that as my dharma, I just became the conduit for the divine knowledge. I don't have that divine knowledge. In fact, sometimes students will come back to me and they're like, "Do you know that you said this? That's really brilliant." I'm like, "I didn't say that. What are you talking about?" And then sure enough, because there's a video recording, okay, I'm a conduit to that. That's where I put that out there. But I had to get over the idea that it is as honorable to sell as it is to buy.
Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So I never consider myself a salesperson. I still don't. But I do consider myself a personable person. I can make and build connections, but all that is selling me to the intended consumer, right? Yoga is available everywhere, but my attention is the most valuable thing I can give. And so that's when I'm making my offering. And if it fits the person who I'm speaking with, I don't have to sell anything. But the point is that if it's something that I would want to buy, then it is an honorable thing for me to offer as well as a service.
That's
I
beautiful.
think that
Hmm.
that's really a big, it's a big crux in terms of how wellness professionals navigate this business in the culture that says yoga should be free. Yes,
Yeah.
yoga is for free because yoga is a mindset. But the
Hmm.
practice of being guided, that's valuable. That's
Absolutely.
that's astronomical. No one
Right.
could afford you or me, right? If they had to pay for us full on. But we try to meet the market in a way that can sustain our lives and theirs. That's the real crux. And this is where I didn't want to open a studio. But the work that I was doing in the world was different than the studios and the gyms that I was working at, and it didn't fit their dharmic mold. So for me to do this, I had to build this. But my ideal that came from that was not just having a solo practice. I call myself a pranapreneur, but in solo practice, I wanted to create a space for other practitioners to remove their burden of the overhead, the business decisions, and say, hey, let's collaborate. And that's why I was so excited to meet you, Olga, is because
Yeah.
there's too much competition in
Hmm.
the yoga family. And I'm using that word intentionally because we're in this together, whether we like it or not, whether we have the same lineage, whether we have the same mission. The point is that if we want to be ambassadors for yoga, we have got to let go of this idea that I'm competing with you to be successful.
Yeah, so yes, it's just different. I mean, there are so many different stages, how people can take on, what they do, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in yoga industry, but in any other industry. But, that's what I'm so passionate about, creating the sense of collaboration because we all of us have very unique gifts. And
Absolutely.
even about this Maryland yoga teacher group that we have that has it's 2,500 people here, right? There is so much of gold and wisdom and possibility to collaborate in just really marvelous ways, right? So that's what I'm just kind of that's we are on the same page, right? Because I can do my thing and just being afraid that if I say something that somebody's going to steal it from me because it happens, those things,
It
those things
does.
happen, and we know that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just kind of, so that would be my question, for you is, if someone is listening and watching this, with you, like, what do you think? And there are many things that were touched on, what do you think would be one or two things that that you really truly shine from the place of your being? Because for you, I see that is just kind of, you're talking a lot about their dharma. You're talking this is, I see you as a woman on a mission, that you have a calling, it's just not just only I'm doing this because of the money, yet I want to be, paid, for the value that I've been creating because you invest in yourself and in your education and in everything, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so and so my thing is just, what do you think people here within this community could really learn from you? How do you think, just if somebody would meet with you as a yoga teacher or a studio owner, how could they benefit from meeting with Kimberlyn?
Oh, wow. One of my favorite things, especially working in my teacher training program, is helping my teacher trainees find their unique spark. And it's surprising to me how how often there's that level of expectation of almost the cult of personality, right? That if I go and I study with this person, I have to do it their way. No, take from them, process it through yourself, right? Meaning do the practice and
Mm-hmm.
then see what what synchronizes and continue to play with that. And so that's probably my favorite part is being a yoga and a wellness mentor is helping people not just discover their dharma, but then from that intention and paying attention, can we find the actions? Can we find the niche to help you build your, ideally for me, complementary audience so that I can send people who don't fit me to you, right? Because not everyone is my student. And that's good because the more voices that we have, the broader the understanding of how yoga is everything. It's all yoga.
Absolutely. And it's I love what you are saying because, none of us can be for everyone. And it's just so beautiful to help somebody on the pathway to find their voice. And at the beginning, I remember my journey. I did follow, just, something that was resonating with me. I did follow it. And it just has gotten me to a certain point when I just, realized that I just started creating my own voice, in all of
Yeah,
this. And
yeah.
first, I didn't even notice that, it was not even noticeable. But then as I really and I have been someone who is just so devoted to this. This is until my last breath. This is just not just kind of some gig that I do just for a,
Right.
few years. Yeah, I know that just, I will die as a yoga therapist and a yoga teacher, or just kind of wellness mentor, just like you are, because, it's just an ongoing journey to rediscovering yourself, finding your voice. And it's just so beautiful that you are actually someone who does help, people who either are on the journey as yoga teachers, becoming yoga teachers, or there might be here yoga teachers who really just, like would so benefit to sit with someone like you
Yeah,
and just, have a really conversation to find the grounding, like where is it where you can, start really to shine, really just who you are, your unique way, how to present yoga. So I really, really, love that, you just kind of, are opening yourself,
yeah.
to something like that.
There's
Um,
a translation from the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't remember which line verse it is, but it's on the wall at Kripalu Institute, and it says basically, something in the sense that doing someone else's dharma, right, is always going to be harder than doing our own, but no one else can do our dharma. Something there's some more
yeah.
eloquent way, but in the sense that, yeah, we've got to find our own dharma. But I like to think of it not so much as going out on the hunt or even on like a scavenger hunt, but more on a rediscovering, almost
Mm,
a remembering,
yes.
remembering that spark, that Atman center that was like, yes, this is what
Right.
I'm here to do. This lights me up. And when we can have a return on our investment, and that investment again to me is my attention, if I can get a return of that energy source to begin again, that's that's our dharma. That for me is where that alignment starts to come into play, into fruition. I'm like, yep, this is what I'm here to do. Because yes, there's hard days, do not get me wrong, there are hard days, but there's more days where I'm like, the passion carries me through those fears,
Mm-hmm.
those that not even just a passion of I want to, a passion of validation, like,
Mm-hmm.
what choice do I have? This I think of, literally Bhagavad Gita in the sense that Arjuna is like, this is what I have to do. This is, which is what I'm hearing from you too, Olga, in the sense that I would do this even if
Right.
if I had to get a real job. I would still be teaching yoga.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know that, your business is called Life's Work Yoga, right?
Yes.
If people would like to connect, from this group with you, individually, how would they do that? Would you give us just kind of, some ways how we can get in touch with you if we would like to have a conversation with you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is just Life's Work Yoga, right? So it's all one word in terms of the website, lifesworkyoga.com. There'll be a way to send me a message in there. But heck, lifesworkyoga@gmail.com. That's an email directly to me. Or
Gotcha.
you can text me. Heck, text me. Just make sure you tell me who you are so I know that you're not, some spammer out there. But my direct cell phone is the studio number, and that's 240-447-4435. So I would welcome whether it was a conversation about where you're at, where we could collaborate, or how I could support you in doing your life's work. That's my dharma. That's what I'm here to do.
Beautiful. I want to, really thank you, Kimberlyn. I have a feeling that we could just kind of go on forever because there's just so much to, talk about and discuss. And you are really, a well of, wisdom and
Thank
beautiful
you.
passion, around you. And yes, and I'm just, really looking forward to continue just kind of, this conversation with you
Yeah,
and with everyone else, because I think that we could get really so many different levels of support, here as
yeah.
meeting once a month on a Zoom or even in the studios, and things like that. And that is something that is going to be evolving. And I know that you are someone who is passionate about it, and I know that you would be a really great asset, for so many people who just really might be struggling, in the business,
We're meant to do this together, right? Yoga
Yes,
Being Union.
absolutely.
We're
Yes,
meant to do it together.
yes, yes, absolutely. And with that, I really want to thank you, and let's just kind of, continue, our conversation going forward.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Olga.
Thank you.